Yeah, so to give a little bit of context, we had three interns that came in the summer. And
Mm,
so we actually had them do a deep dive, and we were really at first looking at, on the ground practices, kind of how can we help these practitioners to understand what they need to do. And so we went in looking at the literature with can we top down kind of fill out this chart based on research that already exists about responsible AI practices. And so what the interns found was it's such a new field. There really wasn't enough information to kind of plug in there. So what we discovered is like we're really going to need to build from the ground up and
mm,
kind of talk to the practitioners out there and kind of hear them say what they're seeing. So we talked to responsible AI consultants. So we were aiming to get those participants that had interacted with different teams, whether it be as a champ trying to kind of help guide them on any kind of requirements, or an impact assessment. Maybe it's a researcher in the company that also takes their research and kind of helps teams implement a fairness assessment if they research fairness. So we were trying to reach those people that had a breadth of kind of, I guess, insights into where teams were at.
It seems like you ended up even expanding the scope of the inquiry itself, right?
Yes. So what we found when we tried to be like, what have you seen as far as, the way people go about data collection?
Hmm.
And would you say that like that's a more or less mature way of collecting data for training an AI system? And what we would hear about it is like, well, we'd like to do this, but we're not, or we're not
Hmm.
able to because of X, Y, and Z barriers. And what happened is the conversation frequently, I would say, shifted to things that weren't just these concrete practices, but
Hmm.
much broader in scope. So
Hmm.
things on the organizational level, like the idea that, my manager doesn't prioritize this, so I don't have time for it. Or,
Hmm.
we want to do this, but we don't have the tool or the knowledge to do this. So I wish I had more resources.
Hmm.
And I need someone to help kind of walk me through this. And our collaboration with data scientists and UX, it's just
Hmm.
like missing. And
Hmm.
that then was kind of informing like why practices were or weren't happening and the level of maturity they were at.
So it seems like just using the lit review to determine the scope was kind of something that you had to change later on. So one of the were you also did you code the lit review or did you just do kind of a free form lit review?
No, we have like a lot of documentation of notes, and
Mm,
the interns did a lot on that end to kind of have citations, understand where the literature, what they're pulling from. But
mhm,
that was more an understanding, a humble understanding that there is no pre-existing maturity
mm,
model, and that being open to learning what should go in this. We
mhm.
didn't even know if perhaps there should be a separate maturity model for each principle. Right. We really
Got it.
didn't know.
Right.
And so it was really helpful to actually find out from participants, the more we talked to them, that it wasn't just about these practices. It was about the organizational foundations that facilitate them, and then these collaborative relationships and the way people really approach these problems. And so we were able to build out our maturity model into like three broader categories instead of one category that was just these practices. I'll say in this like kind of first step here where
Mm,
we're having these interviews, we talked to 47 different people. And after those first 10, we really had a better idea of what the interview guide should look like.
mhm,
And just the diversity of experiences that our participants had made it clear that before the interview, to kind of just do a little research on what their background area was, because some interviews were very different than others. So acknowledging like that how diverse the participants were and kind of having to adapt the template of our interview guide to match that some. And then I think towards the end we had some kind of new topics that weren't those practices, but things related to like the timing in which you do these actions, in the way in which you collaborate, that we then were able to kind of add to the interview guide because we heard that they were important.
mhm. Got it. Okay. So did you start to have like multiple discussion guides based on the background of each participant then, or different
Yeah,
set of participants?
I wouldn't say, I think they were doing like an interview a day. This was a quite intense. So I think
Sure.
they were, yeah, on the spot, also kind of on the fly, saying it does this conversation. So for being semi-structured, I think the interns did a great job at, learning how to kind of pivot on the spot and keep the conversation going. Because it is difficult when you're talking to people who have such different experiences. Some of these were people who work in legal. Other people are designers, UX designers. Other people are software engineers. And so you just have to go in, kind of knowing what your goal is, but then also allowing them to talk about their experience in responsible AI and what that looks like. Yeah.
And in the practical aspect of this, it seems like you were not doing all of the interviews. You had interns who were doing the interviews, and you were primarily doing the data tagging, data coding, that piece, right?
Yes. So 47 interviews is a lot. And so what we tended to do is we'd have one main interviewer, and then we'd have a second person attend kind of as a note taker, and also to jump in if they felt there was a pause and an opportunity for a question they had. Usually we built in, also being like, hey, did you have anything else you wanted to add? So making sure that person, who also sometimes has a more zoomed out view, is able to ask a question if they have while there as well. And we did start with some of those kind of dimensions, and kind of looking at, the debriefing and talking with the interns, what a really rough code book might look like. And by code book, I mean kind of what are these concepts that we want to label in our data as we go line by line, highlighting, they were talking about this thing. And for us, we were very aware that it wasn't going to be mutually exclusive. We knew the labeling process would be really pretty complex because we first had a category of, is this like less mature or more mature area? So that in itself was just like one kind of dimension in which we needed to label. And then we also had others. So we did label the principles, and then we labeled the practices. And as we went through more interviews, we built that out and said, we're also seeing, them talk specifically about customers. Let's add a label for that, and have a definition for that. And then there was a constant meeting to calibrate on the coding as well. So in the start, I had help from Rutong, who's great, and my colleague Samir as well. And so we would code a few and then meet and talk about what we were seeing. And then also I was unsure if this fit this code, and then kind of help calibrate to the point where we felt then we were confident to independently go and code each. Ideally, you could read through all your interviews to help kind of with a thematic analysis of like, what would these dimensions or what would the code book look like? We hadn't finished 47 interviews, and we didn't have time to listen front to back every interview. So we kind of had to do it in iteration and kind of progressively.
Okay, so let's double click on that. So you were kind of doing the coding. You had like maybe a preview set of code book ready, but then that was already across multiple dimensions. So whenever you're coding, you were already, even in the first pass, you were coding data across multiple dimensions using multiple labels. Is that
yes.
Correct?
Yeah. And so I think the platform for us was really helpful because you highlight and there's a note, and in that note, you can have the multiple codes. And then it was so helpful on the analysis side for me to be able to drill down and say, I want to see, all the codes about, transparency and the practice of documentation that are less mature. And so that allowed, I think we had over 1,000 notes from those 47 interviews, but that allowed a really helpful organization and sifting through of these codes.
I actually remember it being more than 2,000.
Yeah, so at some points we realized that we had like too detailed codes, and we're not seeing much about them at all. And so we rolled them up into one. So there's a way to hide codes that aren't that like, so like we started with a code and then we would hide it and or roll it up into another one. So we kind of had a hierarchy going.
And did
A
the
different
hierarchy, was it hierarchy already did you already build out hierarchy in the first limited set of codes, or did you build out hierarchy later on?
So we had hierarchy more topic wise. I would say instead of like a drill down, it was like, the maturity codes, the principle codes, more of these practices codes. And then hierarchy, I mean, like within the practices, we had collaboration. And then it became apparent that there was so much in these interviews about collaboration. So we would from that point on kind of be more nuanced and then go back to the collaboration codes we had and be more specific. So what we found was there is certain instances where it's talking about, what's it mean to be a mature consultant helping a team? And then other instances where what's it mean to be a mature team when you're trying to collaborate with a consultant? So there is kind of these different collaborative relationships. What's it mean to be mature within your product team when doing these practices? And so that did evolve as we were coding.
And then you said, one of the things that a lot of researchers struggle with is this idea of kind of making sure, how do we ensure that there is a broad agreement in the team on the codes that we have used, or the coding process, right? There are some statistical methods that you can use, but that's, in my opinion, are very limited and don't really help much. You had a really nice process going, especially given the fact that you and Mickey were probably the only kind of constant people on the research team, and everyone else was either coming in for a little bit, whether that's interns. How did you ensure? Talk to me a little bit about how do you ensure a consistent coding process and a consistent understanding of codes across the entire team?
Well, once everything was coded and we began to look at it and try and understand this data, so there's a lot of complexity and a lot of interdependence. And so I think that interdependence made it clear where things overlapped or were quite similar versus where they were different. And so I think for the practices, like we started off having like very specific, like, for example, under doing, the user research aspect versus like the design aspect and prototyping. And we had a few different things. And then what we found was, it needed to be a higher level. We didn't have specific participants talk about a specific example of those. It was more higher level. And so that's where, if we did hear a lot, it'd be very helpful to have that broken down. Samir would have appreciated, that nuance. But it's much easier to then, synthesize together. You can't summarize and then break it down, but you can take a lot and then put it together, I guess. A lot of the stuff that we heard was stuff that's less concrete. And this is probably why there is no evaluation or assessment of responsible AI, because as a topic, it's very context dependent. There's no one clear right answer. And so a lot of what we would be easy to code, like we did X and then Y, and here's what it looked like when a team did it. A lot of what we heard was like, this is what teams should do, and these are the questions that should be addressed. And so I think that made it quite a challenge when coming up with these categories, because it wasn't super clear what concrete categories there were. And so that's where we came up with kind of these team approaches. So like, what was the motivation for building an AI system? And then common language as a theme across topics. And so those kind of abstract pieces are actually like the bulk of the work right now in responsible AI, are some of these things that aren't so quantifiable, but we kept seeing pop up over and over. And so with that thematic analysis, we were really able to capture these pieces of work that take a lot of time, these kind of discussions of trade-offs that we captured in our data that I think would be totally missed if you gave a survey out and you asked people what they did. Because people, maybe it doesn't fit those concrete lists of I did check.
Right. What would Amy's advice to Amy be before Amy started on analyzing and working on this project?
Good luck. No, that's my advice to me. What would my one advice be? Yeah, I think this project couldn't have been done alone. And I think while I did do a lot of that specific analysis of the coding and in Marvin and in the analysis part, so much of what allowed me to do that successfully was having conversations, kind of like, right, the forest and the trees, the calibration of the code book. And so I would say that going into it would have been like, I think I had some, it was intimidating to have that much data. And then to be like, you'll be okay because you're not the only qualitative researcher on your team. And so it's really been a team effort to break this down and write it up.